Hello, everybody. Welcome to WOTS Weekly Features. Today's guest is Amy Mathers from the Yeah Right podcast. We'll be talking about podcasting, YA literature, and tons of book recommendations. So get those TBR lists ready. I'm Yelly, and I'll be your host. WOTS Toronto operates on land that is the territory of the Huron-Wendat and Paytune First Nations, the Seneca and the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. This territory is the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Anishinaabe and Allied Nations to care for and share the resources around the Great Lakes in peace. We encourage you to educate yourself about the land that you live on, wherever you're tuning in from. All right, so now Amy Mathers is the founder of the Amy Mathers Teen Book Award, is the Canadian Children Book Center's resident YA expert, and founder of the podcast Yeah Right. Yeah Right is all about Canadian books for teens and their creators. Amy has read books from every province and territory, exploring Canada and promoting Canadian authors and books along the way. Yeah Right has featured interviews with Sherry Dimeline, Tom Ryan, Robin Stevenson, Daniel Young-Ullman, and more. Inspired by Terry Fox's and Rick Hansen's Canadian journeys, Amy decided to honor her passion for reading Canadian teen literature while working around her physical limitations by completing a marathon of books. Amy read one Canadian teen fiction book a day for each day of 2014 in order to raise funds for the Amy Mathers Teen Book Award. Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Let's jump right into it. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your amazing podcast?
Okay, so I'm a huge fan of Canadian teen fiction or young adult fiction, whichever you want to use. But I noticed when I was actually a teen that I couldn't even tell you who Canadian authors of teen books were, which
Mm-hmm.
I found troubling. And after high school, I was lucky enough to be a volunteer for the White Pine Selection Committee. So, White Pine being the part of the Force of Reading School program that's for high school level students, and then there's a whole selection committee behind it where we read the books and we talk about the books and then we vote on our top 10. And based on scoring, whatever makes the top list is the list that goes to high school teens in about October every year. So once I got started with that, I was reading Canadian young adult teen authors all the time. And it really started to build my knowledge on the subject. And um, so at the time, I was also volunteering for the Canadian Children's Book Center. And they were very kind and they invited me to their yearly gala where they give out their book awards for different subjects like nonfiction or mystery. There's a John Spray Award for mystery. The TD Canada's Children's Book Award. And then, awards for picture books, awards for illustration, that sort of thing. But I noticed when I went, I loved it. I totally geeked out on how many authors were there and the fact that I could talk to them. And I actually saw Jean Little, who unfortunately has passed now. But it was just amazing because I always used to read Jane Little when I was a kid, and
Mm-hmm.
so I was starstruck. And but the thing I noticed that was lacking in the awards was an award for teen fiction. There was a lot for anyone under 12, but then over 12, you were pretty much on your own. So I wrote up a plan and I proposed it to the book center, saying that I would read a Canadian young adult teen book a day every day for 2014. And by doing that, I was reviewing them every day. I was doing a Tumblr post every day, and by doing that, I raised awareness, and I also was fundraising to start the Teen Book Award.
Hmm.
So,
Very cool.
yeah, it was great. I mean, it was a surprise that the award ended up getting named after me. That was my end goal. But I'm so proud of it every year.
Mm-hmm. Well, as you know, I love reading as well, and I know that reading a book in a day is really hard. So it must have been very difficult to read a book a day for a year and commit to all of that.
Yeah, I did have 8 hour days of
Wow,
reading. Yeah. It's
absolutely.
even I don't know how I got through that whole year.
Do you have any like tips that helped you become such a quick avid reader out of that year of your life?
Well, luckily I also had a lot of practice with the white pine stuff because you have to read a certain amount of books in a certain time frame.
Hmm.
So I had that practice, and then um, I just I just went for it.
Sure, absolutely.
There wasn't really any real training, I guess.
Hmm.
I mean, I did do a couple of one-off days where I would see if I could actually read a book in a day, and
Hmm.
then, but yeah, once I was actively doing it, I knew I didn't have a choice. So,
Very cool. Could you, how did the podcast come out of all of this? What did that road to the podcast look like?
so in the beginning, the first 2 or 3 years of the award, um, once the list came out, I was there's a separate panel of judges for the award, and I have nothing to do with it. So I find out when everyone else finds out who's nominated this year. But from the start, in the beginning, I did written interviews with all the nominated authors, and then uh, I started podcasting to talk to authors one on one, and then we started doing a podcast a year with all the nominees at once.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, we've been really lucky. Um, Canadian writers are, I mean, the ones I know, they are friendly and willing to give up their time for this. And even the one year when the Marrow Thieves won the award,
Mhm.
uh, Sherry was actually in England when we wanted to do the podcast. And we made it so we could fit her schedule, and she called in from England.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was amazing. It's great.
I've listened to a couple of episodes of the podcast, and it seems like a lot of the authors are very open and forthcoming with all of the amazing questions that you have. So it must be really exciting to be able to sit down and have those heart to hearts with all these great writers.
Yeah, I do love it. I mean, you can sit down and think you know where a podcast is going, but then once you get talking to the author, it can go in an entirely different direction. And then also, usually I find that even if I hadn't been planning for it, a theme emerges.
Sure.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's great.
Absolutely. Um, is is the Amy Mathers Teen Book Award still ongoing? Do you have one going for this year as well?
Yeah, thankfully it's administrated by the Canadian Children's Book Center.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it's part of their awards lineup, but they are a not for profit organization and they do rely on grants and fundraising to keep these awards going to support Canadian authors for kids and teens. So if you want to donate, you can go to their website and I'm sure you can find it very easily. They could always use the money to support authors because
For sure.
authors always need support, of course.
Absolutely. Okay, I would love to chat with you about some YA fiction as the YA fiction resident expert of Canada. Um, what, in your opinion, is special about YA fiction? Like, what can YA do that other genres might not be able to?
I like to think that the YA teen genre offers more hope than adult books often do. Um, they're about that stage in your life where anything seems possible. And if you believe that you can do something and really work at it, you can do it. So teens face challenges that are often surmountable, which I think is a wonderful message for teens in general.
Absolutely, I agree. What are some of the last YA books that you've read and loved?
Well, um, every year for about the past 4 years, I think the Forest of Reading has now done a summer teen committee for White Pine and Red Maple and Silver Birch. So the White Pine list, they um, ask for applications for teens to be on this committee, and then they bring their own books from Canadian authors in the past couple years that they'd like to see on the list because they think they're great reads. And I love that list the most because it's actually teens recommending their own books. I mean, I know from experience as an adult, I'm way out of the teen zone, and and so I know that okay, a lot of these recommendations come from adults who aren't in that zone anymore. So I absolutely love to hear it when teens tell us what they want to read because this year I set my sights on reading the teen list, the White Pine Teen Committee summer reading list, and it's this huge range of books. I mean, it's officially a list of 15, but there's one by Kenneth Apple on there that's called Thrive, and it's the third in a trilogy. So
Mm-hmm.
I made it 17 books instead, and I've been reading them, and it's amazing. each one is a genuine surprise. Like right now, I'm reading A Dark and Hollow Star by Ashley Shutterworth, and it's amazing. It's a fantasy book. It's got lots of Greek mythology undertones and talks about fairies and the fae, and there's just the world building is
Mm.
incredible. And then it ranges from serious to more lighthearted. And you can really see the the range of age levels because it's
Mm.
grade 9 to grade 12. That's a pretty big spread.
Sure.
So,
Lots of growth that happens within those years.
yeah. Yeah. So some of the books are definitely a cusp of university books, and some
Mm.
are more just pleasure reads, like recreational reads. And that's good because we need both.
Hmm. I like that you mentioned that a lot of the times YA books are written by and kind of marketed by adults, even though they're written for teens. So it must be really special to be able to read these books that are picked by teens and are ring true in that way to them.
Yes, I wish we had a venue where we could get more book suggestions by teens,
And
but I'm not quite sure what that would be yet.
for sure. That can be your next podcast.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Let's see. And then could you tell us more about the White Pine Teen Committee summer reading list? You already mentioned it a little bit, but what what is the process of, if you know, like choosing the books that go on that list specifically? Are there any other books that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Well, mm, unfortunately, I wasn't able to facilitate it this year, so
Mm.
Meredith Touching from Forest of Reading did it. But the years before that, I was the facilitator. So it's really just about getting a bunch of teens together. They bring their books and then they book talk to each other.
Mm.
And sometimes teens bring the same books, so there's more than one person who has interest in them, and you really just don't know what you're going to get,
Mm-hmm.
which is what I like about it, because especially this year when I wasn't able to facilitate when the list came out, there were so many books I never heard of. So
Sure.
I thought that was great. I always love hearing about books that haven't come up on my regular radar.
Mm-hmm. I feel like YA is also so special in the sense that a book can be out for 2 years and then all of a sudden become TikTok famous and everybody's reading it.
Yeah.
So yeah, those surprises are a little bit of a delight as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, let's see. Do you have any like standout episodes of the podcast that you'd recommend to people?
Well, for sure, um, I love getting together with all of the nominees for the award. And
Mm, yeah.
uh, the time I did it last year, it sparked a really interesting conversation about the publishing world.
Mm,
And also, it's shown how diverse the list has become over the years, even like 6 years. It's very positive, I think, the changes that have come to YA and teen literature. And so I would obviously recommend the ones that are the groups of authors together,
mm,
because sometimes a lot of the time they know each other. And
Yes.
so there's just the different things that are going on that maybe aren't part of the podcast officially, but just shows the camaraderie of the YA teen author community, which
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And then there are specific podcasts like long ago before COVID, I actually took a go bus to Hamilton because Darren Groth was speaking at the Hamilton Public Library, and I never met him, but I'd read his books, and I wanted him to be on the podcast. So that was great because we just taped a podcast right there in the library.
That's so cool.
And he is larger than life. So
Mm-hmm.
it ended up running longer than it should have, but it was so much fun. And then there are other specific things like oh, well, I always love Heather Smith, of course. She ended up being the first book. Her book Bay Girl was the first book I read on my marathon of books because it's set in St. John, and we became friends after that. And she writes the most amazing books. Like that was her first book, but not. She's gone on in 7 years to write multiple books for different ages, and they're all amazing. So I like that. I also like discovering authors that maybe others weren't paying attention to.
Mm-hmm.
So Michelle Barker, she had been known for her picture book, but then I got my hands on, I think it's called 1000 Eyes.
Okay.
And I read it, loved it, had her on the podcast. And then it turned out later that she actually ended up on my award list and won the award.
That's
So
so cool.
I thought that was great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Those connections are so sweet, and also, like you said, it's so important to highlight Canadian authors because very often still there's not as much of a push around Canadian authors that there should be. So that's such important work that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. But I would like to say, I think this gets overlooked a lot, but from what I've experienced with Canadian young adult teen authors, they love hearing from their readers.
Hmm.
So if you read a book that you think is amazing, write the writer, because they don't always get that feedback, and it's an important part of the process, so they have faith in what they're doing.
Hmm.
And it's always great
Absolutely.
to let someone know that they touched your life in some way.
For sure. I love that. How can we as readers and consumers of podcasts and all of these great things, how can we support you and your work currently?
Well, I'm very lucky. I'm the host of the podcast, but the book center, Emma Hunter, especially, thank you so much, Emma. She's my tech person, and she fills in all the background stuff that I know nothing about. And she even came up with a song for the podcast, and it's great. It sounds so much better once Emma is done with it. So I would say, if you have suggestions for authors you might like me to talk to, you're free to email me or the book center. And if you want to support us financially, definitely donations should go through the book center. And You can always put a memorandum saying, I'd like this to go to the award or the podcast or whichever.
Awesome. Very cool. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for sitting down with us today, Amy. It's been a pleasure to chat with you about YA.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great. I agree.
Amazing. All right, everybody, to find out more about the Yeah Right podcast, go to bookcenter.ca/publications/yeah-right. You should also be able to find it wherever you listen to your podcasts. This has been today's WOTS Weekly Feature. Tune in tomorrow where we'll be in conversation with the Children's Book Bank. And if you're itching for some more YA related content, please check out this Friday's WOTS Summer Spectacular event, the Inspire Teen Reads competition. Inspire Teen Reads presents its 6th annual book pitch competition in which youth aged 12 to 18 attempt to convince a panel of esteemed authors to read their favorite book in 5 minutes. Teens will also compete in the book jacket design category, in which young people nationwide design a new book jacket for their favorite book. Finalists from both categories will be invited to present their pitches and creations to a panel of esteemed authors who will select 3 winners from both categories. Register for the event at the link in the comments at Eventbrite. And all right, everybody, have a wonderful Wednesday. You can find more information about that on our website as well. And for this week's discounts and deals, visit toronto.thewordonthestreet.ca/weekly-features. From all of us at WOTS, happy reading.